So today we have Imtiaz with us. He is a renowned Pakistani journalist. He had spent some time in Germany, where he started, or early in his career, he worked as a Deutsche Welle correspondent. And he returned to Pakistan and founded the Center for Research and Security Studies in 2007 with the help of Germany's Henrik Boyle Stiftung. The Center for Research and Security Studies is a think tank advocacy center that is committed to the cause of independent research, nonpartisan analysis, and informed advocacy. He has also recently founded Matrix Media. However, he is renowned for his journalistic style of being very composed. Furthermore, he has appeared on international televisions, stations such as Al Jazeera, TRT World, Voice of America Pashto, and also on TV channels such as Geo, Aaj, and Dawn. Furthermore, he has also interviewed heads of government or heads of state. I would like to ask Imtiaz Saab to elaborate on his experience and any changes in professional norms that he has observed over the years.
Professional hazards, on the one hand. On the other hand, I would say professional norms are not followed as much as they used to be, particularly in the West. What I learned, I had to unlearn a couple of things, but which was also very sad. So the challenges have always been there. But one thing I must underline, that challenges, I think, polish up your survival, your management, your professional skills. They also teach you a lot as to how to navigate difficult circumstances.
And talking about some of the things that you had to learn and unlearn. So I'd like to add some background here about social media, etc., where anybody can start a podcast like myself, but I cannot just call myself a journalist. Being a journalist requires a lot more, and there should be journalistic ethics and standards, etc. So I wanted to ask you, what kind of journalistic ethics and principles should journalists follow?
It's very simple. There are 5 basic W's: why, where, why, when, what, where, how. These are the 5 basic principles of journalism, and that also dictates that you stay true to those principles. Cross-confirmation of information, avoiding fake news, critical analysis of any information that you have at hand, rather than passing it on. In this age of instant gratification, when everybody has this source of information in their hands in the form of the mobile phone, I think it has become even more pronounced that people now tend to pass on information without verifying facts. Very recently, I encountered many things, and since I'm part of many WhatsApp groups, so I keep annoying people by questioning the very act of sharing some information which could be fake, which is motivated, which is skewed, and that's why we call it, this is an information overload age as well as of fake news. And that, I think, has become the biggest challenge for any journalist who wants to be upright, who wants to be truly professional.
Very interesting. And do you believe, or do you think that there is any sort of influence from the government or from the establishment or other special interests in, for example, Pakistan or in other countries as well?
Well, I think the military establishments or security establishments in almost every country have a big say in national affairs, in security matters. That somehow also resonates also in the media itself. And in a country like Pakistan or Iran, well, not really Iran, but like Pakistan, where we have a functional democracy, where we have free media, relatively free media, we still have a lot of issues, particularly the military establishment tries to dictate the agenda. They at will at times push the agenda, push the news that suit them or that they think should be disseminated. And it could be bad as well as good. There are times, however, things that you may not agree with, but they would like particularly the television channels to disseminate that. And this has become another challenge for the entire media, for the society, the mushrooming of television channels on the one hand, and then the social media availability like Twitter on the other hand. And then the television channels in particular do face pressures for certain kind of news. And it becomes very difficult actually to then stay away or not to report. At times, a couple of channels do resist, but then there are consequences for that. At times, yes, at times, no, but usually people have this, we call it, in German, they say Schere im Kopf, that you have a censor in mind. As a media owner, as a media manager, as a reporter, you are cognizant, you are aware, conscious of the red lines, of the limits of you yourself as an individual reporter, correspondent.
And compared to the region, the Middle East and, for example, South Asia, do you think Pakistan has more or less free speech? Personally, as a non-journalist, I think I have had very few issues with free speech, but I'm not in a journalistic capacity. I'm not on television or reporting on the news. So what has your experience been?
Oh, I think we in Pakistan are still far better, much better off compared to Bangladesh, for example. Bangladesh, you hardly have any opposition, you hardly have any opposition newspapers. It's a very limited landscape available for the other view, for the dissent, for the different view other than what the Awami League stands for. The same has happened, unfortunately, in India, where the establishment, as well as the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, have simply joined hands. So they have aligned their interests. And those interests are also aligned with those of the corporate sector. And unfortunately, a lot of media, because the media also primarily, private media is a commercial enterprise. So you have to be very conscious of that fact, that commercial enterprise also finds it convenient to align itself with the interests of the government, of the state, and of the largest political party. And that way they preserve their commercial interests. So this also then forces individual reporters, correspondents, the editors, somehow to fall in line. Not everybody, but a lot of people do tend to become conformists. They just lap up, they embrace what comes their way or what they believe is the right thing, because very few people then tend to annoy the establishment. And the big parties like Bharatiya Janata Party or the big corporate sector, as also in Pakistan, a couple of big tycoons, they also become sort of part of the establishment. And with them, they bring a considerable pressure on the media outlets as well as on the reporters.
Very interesting. And in terms of the West, do you think that for example, there have been some infamous, I would consider misreporting or non-misreporting about, for example, certain wars in the Middle East by international media or Western media? Do you think that they also sometimes follow a narrative set by their establishment or their special interests?
Well, I think if you look at the larger issues like war on terror in Afghanistan that went on for 20 years, or if you look at the Chinese issues, you look at the narrative that is emanating from prime news sources in the West like the CNN, the BBC, the Fox News, and then Washington Post. So the entire Western narrative is largely driven by their respective military establishments, and that flows from the NATO thinking. The NATO thinking considers, or the G20, well, G20, China is part of G20, but let's say the Western alliance, the NATO,
G7,
G7,
NATO.
yeah, to a certain extent, but NATO countries, they have a particular narrative on China, and that, meanwhile, is largely driven by a sense of insecurity, by the sense of fast approaching China. So somehow that narrative, I think, is colored, influenced by the US, by the British, by the German security establishments, I would say, because they are the guardians of their geo-economic interests. So the geopolitical alliance tries to preserve its geo-economic interests, and because they see in China as a threat to their geo-economic interests, that's why they have raised this bogey of human rights in China. Right now, there's a lot of talk about the repercussions of zero tolerance
For COVID.
for COVID, and that policy obviously caused ripples within China itself. But then the Western countries basically took upon themselves to use this as a baton to hurl at China. So that is one prime example. Then the war in Iraq, for instance, or the war on terrorism. This also showed how the mainstream media basically embraces particular narratives that are being churned out from London, from Washington, from elsewhere.
So, on social media, for example, there have been a lot of debates about free speech, and essentially, there have been instances where certain tweets have been taken down. And do you believe that is a restriction on free speech, or that a company says, okay, we've got these policies, we've got these terms and conditions, and if somebody doesn't follow them, well, that's a private legal entity, and the government has nothing to do with who they're banning or not banning?
Dobara पूछो.
Yes. So essentially, you've got social media where certain posts on
Oh yeah, okay,
major,
got it. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the problem. Like you cannot say much against the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Right now, there will be an outcry, a big hue and cry against the person doing so. Or in Turkey, you can't say much against the President Erdogan. People have been jailed, even young children have been jailed, like teenagers, for saying things that the government thought was against the president, against the president's family or his persona. So yes, this is part of politics today, and this also then infringes on the right of free speech.
Very interesting. And do you think that journalists and the media have a role to play in the building of a national asabiya? And asabiya is a term defined by Ibn Khaldun, who wrote the book The Muqaddimah. Asabiya, in this sense, this term means that sort of national cohesion, having a set of principles and a national foundation that people can agree upon, or certain principles and values that people can agree upon. Do you think that journalists and the media have a role to play in building that, or no?
Well, I think every individual living in the society has a role to work towards cohesion, towards creating a fair, equitable society. And media more so because they have greater access. Television even above everybody because they can be watched. And then, of course, the social media, which has such a proliferation within the societies. So it's not just about the media, it's about everybody. And the media, of course, as long as they are sticking to the basic principles of reporting and cross cross confirmation, cross verification of the facts, I think they are doing their job, because the media is not a moral monitor. The media is just about who said what, where, when, and how,
Okay.
right? So anything beyond that is then falls, I think, in the domain of then the society, and everybody has got this role to perform if they want to contribute to the coherent society or to a peaceful society. But media, of course, has a big responsibility. These days, unfortunately, things have gone awry, and more and more what we are seeing, particularly in Pakistan, is more public relationing rather than nation building or character building, or things that should support the national cohesion.
Very interesting. I'm now going to transition to questions which have less to do with journalism and just general questions. What do you think is the purpose of life?
Just to stay afloat with honor, dignity, and be able to help others as much as possible. I was going through an article by a Finnish writer, and the Finns are the happiest people on earth. And through a survey, I think they extracted 3 things to be happy. And the third tip for happiness is try to do as much as you can to make others happy. Don't be judgmental, and think what positive you can do to the society and to the human beings. That will make you happy.
Wow, that's a great answer. So food prices, energy prices, etc., have risen across the globe. And this time I'd like to ask you specifically about Pakistan. What do you think can be done to alleviate society from these sort of pressures, gas load shedding, or other forms of food insecurity, etc., that people are facing?
Oh, the situation in Pakistan has become too complex to address in one TV interview or in a couple of paragraphs.
Okay.
You know what Pakistan is missing for correction is honest, committed leadership. That leadership is missing. Honesty is missing. There's too much hypocrisy around, and you have to navigate this yourself as an individual, and this makes the challenge even much more enormous. So what had we committed leadership like the countries like Malaysia or Indonesia or some European countries had, I think Pakistan would be much, much different than what it is today.
And now I'd just like to ask you a lighthearted question about one of the most interesting experiences you've had in terms of travel, or any mind-boggling experience or scene that you've seen in another country.
Oh, there's so many things to tell. Well, there's a very long anecdote, actually, an extremely gratifying incident. It can be long, actually, 2-3 minutes it may take, but the most rewarding incident in my life, in my career, basically was getting helicopters to go to the north to pick up Japanese mountaineers who had met with an accident and they had lost their 7 colleagues. So I got a phone call from the Japanese television NHK that you have to go, and then going up north to Skardu, you don't get helicopters. So I really had to use my professional clout to get a helicopter of the Prime Minister. And then I requested the information minister there. He was very kind, so they allowed us. So we could take off only after 2 days, because the weather was very inclement for 2 days. It had been raining. So when we took off, when the pilot said that we have 2 hours to get into Skardu, so I couldn't stop my tears rolling down because we had worked so hard the last 2 days to first get the helicopter and then get to Skardu. When we got there, the flight also operated. We were lucky. So, and the best thing I did probably in terms of planning. This is also a lesson. You have to pre-position yourself in life. So I was continuously thinking as to how to get those people and also the footage which the television needed, first of all. So I just positioned myself. We landed. We went to the aircraft to the airport, and meanwhile the team arrived. So I got the boarding pass for the cameraman, and once he was done, I told him to just go about. You travel back in this aircraft with the survivors, and then I handed him the boarding pass of somebody and said, "How did you get there?" I said, "Don't ask me. Just get onto the aircraft. You can travel for 50 minutes with these survivors, talk to them, and then send your footage back to Tokyo." So that was a very exciting, extremely exciting experience of my professional life.
Wow, that was amazing. And thank you so much for coming on this podcast.
It's a pleasure.
And I would love to have you on again. And thank you for your very honest answers. And hopefully we'll speak again sometime.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. This was the Intrastellar podcast with Shoaib Hussain. Please like, share, and subscribe, and click the notification button. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again.